So far we have seen two different game modes make their way into Dead by Daylight, the first of which being the lights out game mode, where all the games were played without perks and in complete darkness. The second game mode that made its way into DBD was released on April 1st, 2024, titled My Little Oni, and this game mode revolved around a giant Oni taking on tiny survivors, with the 2 killers versus 8 survivors being confirmed to make its way into Dead by Daylight in the near future. Today we will take a look at 10 more game modes that we need in DBD. As always, let me know in the comments if I do miss any out, and also let me know which game mode you would most like to see added to the game. The first game mode is one that has appeared in several other games, with the most popular being the Call of Duty series, and that game mode would be Prop Hunt. This game mode allows players to transform into random props from the game and have to avoid being caught by the other team. Usually in Call of Duty, finding props is done by going around the map and shooting anything that you think seems out of place. The whole idea for this game mode is that those who are props have to survive for as long as they possibly can without being caught, and the game will end when all the props have been caught or when the timer runs out. If this is the case and the timer does run out, any remaining props will survive the round. During this game mode, props will whistle every so often to let the other team know exactly where they are, and the props also have the ability to transform into 3 different objects. This allows the prop to change into something else if they've been spotted and attempt to get away. If Behavior ever added a prop hunt mode to Dead by Daylight, I think it would be a great game mode that would be fun for both sides, especially since the roles could be swapped around, allowing people to play as the prop and the prop hunter. My idea would be that it's a team of survivors versus a team of killers, and this mode would make it so that those who are the survivors will be disguised as a random prop from DBD's maps, and every so often those props will let out a scream to alert the killer where they are. The killers would have to explore the map and perform a basic attack, also known as an M1, on anything they feel might be out of place. Just like other versions of Prop Hunt, you would also be able to leave clones of the object that you're currently disguised as, and of course there would be a timer counting down to see who can survive the longest being a prop. So this is a really fun game mode that I could definitely see being implemented into Dead by Daylight at some point in the future. This next one is a reversed version of a game mode that we've already seen, and I'm not sure exactly what they'd call this one, but it would reverse the roles of the game mode titled My Little Oni. Instead of tiny survivors, we would see one incredibly small killer that would chase normal-sized survivors or even giant-sized survivors around the map. I think this idea seems really fun, and it would be hilarious to be chased around the map by a tiny Leatherface or even a tiny nurse. Maybe we could even kick the killer if they do miss an M1, much like we can with Victor, or maybe the terror radius would be completely hidden so that they can better sneak up on us and scare us. I do think for this mode they would have to limit the killer's power, or even just have it so the killers are only able to perform a basic attack, also known as an M1, but having a tiny killer would definitely make for some funny moments and would allow killers to just pop up out of nowhere and scare the survivors. And since we've already had small survivors versus a big killer, I think that having these 2 roles swapped around would be pretty easy for them to do and add to the game. So I think this is something that Behavior should definitely look into in the future, and let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys would like to see a game mode with tiny killers and giant survivors. This next game mode would take the idea of Protect the President, and is also one of the game modes mentioned in a previously released survey that Behavior did. VIP, or Protect the President, is a game mode where one survivor is declared the VIP at the beginning of the trial, and the other survivors have to do their best to protect the survivor from being harmed by the killer. It would basically be a bunch of bodyguards trying to protect the President, or VIP. So obviously one survivor is meant to be the VIP, and the other survivors must protect them at all costs. The killer would have to try and down this survivor before the timer runs out, and if they're successful at this, the game will end and then another VIP will be selected for the next round. I think this game mode would be incredibly fun to play with friends, and definitely one that I would enjoy playing myself. The survey that they did also mentioned the way this game mode would work. It would have the VIP be the obsession, and this person is the only one that's able to open the exit gates for themselves or any other survivors. So the other survivors would definitely have to do all they can to keep the VIP alive. And this is a game mode that I could definitely see being a really popular one should they add it to the game, and one that you could most certainly have a lot of fun with, either with friends or in solo. Now this next game mode is certainly one with potential that would really mix things up in terms of gameplay, and that game mode is Swapped Perspective. Swapped Perspective would be a game mode that takes either side's perspective of the game and switches them around. So instead of killers being in first person, they would be in third person, and survivors would be in first person instead of third person. This would make things really interesting for survivors, as seeing these terrifying killers in first person would make for an overall really fun and terrifying experience. With killers also having their point of view changed to third person, this could allow them to see more of what's in front of them, making survivors easier to spot. Chucky would most likely not be involved in this game mode, considering he's already in third person. Maybe his point of view being in third person was actually an initial test for this and something they had in mind for a future game mode, or maybe I'm wrong with that and that's just because he is quite a small killer. But either way, a swap perspective game mode would definitely be a huge hit and could even bring back the scary side of DBD, with the potential of many killers having jump scares in first person, especially with killers like Myers or even Hag with their ability to set traps. But this is a game mode I personally would definitely like to see in the game, and I'm sure that it's also one many of you guys would enjoy playing. Capture the Gen would take on the idea behind the game mode Capture the Flag, and this game mode would have two different teams battling it out in order to obtain the other side's flags. The team with the most flags at the end of the game when the timer runs out will win the round. Capture the Gen would have the same style of this, but with the flags being replaced by generators. Two teams of 5 would have to work and see how many generators they could complete or gain progress on before the timer runs out. Each team would consist of 4 survivors and 1 killer, and the survivor's job would be to capture the generators by repairing them or by having their killer remove progress from the other side's generators. Killers would also have to defend their own generators by injuring or downing the other side's survivors, preventing them from further repairing them. This game mode would see killers and survivors putting aside their differences to work together on a team as they try to defeat the other team, and this would be quite a fun game mode if added to DBD, as we would finally be able to see killers and survivors working together. Killers could be unable to hook the other side's team, but would be able to stop them reaching the gens by injuring or putting them into the dying state. Maybe after a certain amount of time on the floor, said survivor would be picked up automatically and allowed an attempt to reach the generators again. I am uncertain of exactly how they could make this game mode work, but the idea behind it with killers and survivors finally coming together would definitely be a really fun experience for both sides. Deceivers would be a game mode that I would definitely love to have added to Dead by Daylight. This game mode would take inspiration from the popular game mode Among Us, and also the scrapped content for Friday the 13th Paranoia mode. This mode would see a team of survivors working together to complete various tasks around the map, whether that be repairing generators or other objectives. During this time, one survivor would be the killer in disguise, and this survivor or killer would have to attempt to kill off the other survivors without being discovered. This game mode would also be played in rounds, and at the end of the round, everyone would vote on who they think the killer was. Or instead, they could make it a Gary's Mod murder style. So instead of voting at the end of each round, it would instead have it where one survivor spawns in with a weapon, one spawns in with the means to take down the killer, and the others are just bystanders. Perhaps a survivor who spawns in with something to stop the killer could have a perk like Decisive Strike, or even spawn in with a flashbang that they can use to stop the killer. Of course, this would make it extremely fun to try and figure out which one of your teammates is actually the killer in disguise. And it's a game mode that I feel would work perfectly around the event of something like Halloween, and it's definitely one that I could see come into DBD at some point in the future. This next game mode would yet again take inspiration from the Call of Duty series, as this game mode would be based upon their mode Infected. Infected would make it so that at the start of every game, one person is picked to be the infected. The infected person, or other survivors that have become infected, must attempt to infect all of the players, and the game would eventually end when everyone's infected or when the timer runs out. This could work incredibly well in Dead by Daylight, where one survivor will begin the trial as the killer and must catch all other survivors and turn them into killers as well. Once you're caught, you would be turned into the killer and unable to turn back until the round is over. This would make it so the remaining survivors would have to hide or attempt to loop those that have been infected and turn into killers. The killers or the infected would have to down a survivor in order for that survivor to become a killer and then hunt other survivors. The game would keep going until only one survivor was left standing, making this survivor the winner, or until the timer runs out, having multiple winners. I could definitely see this game mode being incredibly popular, and this game mode was also mentioned in a survey, so maybe we could see this game mode added to DBD sooner rather than later. Hide and seek is a popular game that everyone in their life has played at some point, so having a hide and seek game mode in DBD or something similar make an appearance just makes sense. This game mode would have one survivor picked to be the killer at the start of the trial. Their screen would then be hidden, as the rest of the survivors would have to scamper off and find a place to hide. After 10 to 15 seconds, the player whose screen was hidden at the start of the trial would now be able to explore the map for hidden survivors. There would have to be some kind of timer in place so that the games didn't drag on for hours if one survivor found a really good hiding spot, or they could even make it so every 30 seconds a survivor must find a new hiding place to keep the game fresh and interesting. The player who became the killer at the start of the trial would have to hunt down the other survivors by finding exactly where they're hiding. Then once a survivor is found, they could either join the hunt to find the remaining survivors, or they could just be killed and allowed to spectate. Maybe the survivors could also be given the option to crawl as well, so that they're able to crawl underneath places and find better hiding spots. Or maybe this would make it too easy for the survivors. You guys can let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of this, but I certainly think it would be a really fun and simple game mode that they could implement into DBD. This next game mode is inspired by the hit Netflix series Squid Game. In Squid Game, it had much more deadly consequences for getting spotted during the red light phase, but this is definitely a game mode that I could see work perfectly for Dead by Daylight. This game mode was even featured in DBD Mobile recently, so this one has huge potential to come to the game very soon. Red light, green light would have survivors stand in a line, and a killer stand at the finish line. A voice or text would appear on screen, followed by a noise to indicate the green light and red light phases. During green light, survivors would have to move to make their way towards the finish line, And during the red light, survivors have to stop moving. If a survivor happens to move during the red light phase, they would be hit and sent all the way back to the start. In DBD Mobile, this game mode is exactly as stated, with the killer being a bot huntress that would throw a hatchet towards any survivor that has moved, sending them back to the start, and the first survivor to reach the finish line where the killer's standing would win the round. They could even potentially have this game mode come alongside an event like the Bone Chill event, where you're instead hit with a snowball and sent back to the start. Because of the popularity of the game in the TV show, and this game mode already releasing in DBD Mobile not too long ago, I definitely think that red light, green light could make its way into Dead by Daylight sooner rather than later. This final game mode is one that I think will eventually show up in Dead by Daylight, especially since it was also featured in DBD Mobile recently, and it also seems like it would be very easy for them to implement into the game. This game mode is called Trapped Race, and I think it would be a very small and quick game mode that could offer small prizes, such as a banner, a badge, and even blood points. The way this game mode works is that survivors must rush to the finish line waiting for them on the other side, but they also have to be careful not to step in any traps that are hidden along the way. The first person to reach a finish line without stepping in any traps would win the round. It does seem like quite a basic and simple game mode, which is why I think it would be an easier game mode for them to bring to Dead by Daylight. I also think it would be really fun to try this game mode out with friends and see who can make it to the finish line first without getting caught in any of the traps. The traps would also spawn in completely randomly, so there's no way to kind of learn the patterns and where exactly they'll spawn. Since we saw this and the previously mentioned red light, green light appear in DBD Mobile, I do think that this game mode will show up a lot sooner than any of the other game modes previously mentioned above, as well as the fact it is such a simple concept, but also still manages to be a really fun one, and that should make it somewhat easy for Behavior to add this game mode into DBD. So that is my list for 10 game modes that we need to see added to Dead by Daylight. Feel free to let me know any game modes that you think I've missed out, and also let me know which is the one game mode you would most like to see added to the game.